Well, good afternoon. Let's now look at how the situation has been unfolding as we have the post-cabinet reshuffle impact and how it has affected the markets. And we have a political economist from Bukindaba Consulting, Mkhize, in the studio to analyze the aftermath of the cabinet reshuffle and how the markets received it. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you very much for having me.
What did you make out of the performance of the markets, especially when we woke up in the morning and realized that there had been a reshuffle and the rand had actually changed its trajectory in terms of its performance, the way it dropped?
Well, obviously, we know that the market moves with sentiment, but sentiment is also measured by the prolonging of the expectation. If it's something that is a shocker that has not been expected, then the performance even of the currency might even be worse. I don't think the performance of the rand at this point is at the worst case we have ever seen in the history of the rand. But obviously, as it was anticipated, it dropped a bit. However, as we know that for a few days there was an expectation that there would be a reshuffle of the cabinet. Perhaps it's now that the rubber has hit the road, the installation of a particular minister with a particular track record on very, very complex, like public enterprises portfolios, that we now want to see if the confidence will be restored within the next few days. What kind of road shows is the ministry going to take to engage business?
Now let's talk about the press conference. Some would look at it as a comeback of Pravin Gordhan to try and consolidate his integrity and reputation. I mean, when he says that he met investors and ratings agencies, the investors who control around 5 trillion rand, and if they're willing to come and invest in South Africa or borrow the state-owned enterprises' money, then he's willing to do business with them. And then to say that he's sickened by the intelligence report, do you think that with that kind of comeback, it was something that he could have done so that he can actually clear the minds and clear the landscape?
Well, some of the things we know, some of the things we don't know. And we must not pretend like we are privy to the information that the president would have. No, we are privy to the information that Minister Gordhan has. So some of the things are on the known and are on the unknown. But on the fact of the investors, as he cites them, and the control on the share in terms of government equities and bond market and what they could be bringing. Obviously, London, the American market or investors, they have huge lump sum of funds in dollar denominations and in pound denominations that they would obviously pump into their foreign direct portfolios through hedging into our economy. So obviously the minister would have that type of information, which we saw need desperately, because as opposed to a growing absorption of labor into the labor market, there's been a loss of jobs. And what's the best way to pump those jobs besides the extended public works and overspending on the infrastructure is obviously to bring in foreign direct investors. So if foreign direct investors at a global geopolitics, you obviously have to see how the current state of the country is. Is it moving towards the east or is it moving towards the west? If it's moving towards the east through the BRICS alliance, you have to respect the sentiment, obviously, between the wishes of the president and the finance minister. Now, when you check a recent study done by the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, it says that only 23% of black equity is there in the South African bond and equity market, and 13% there is by your insurance and your pension funds, and the 10% is from the recent BEE deals, of which about 1.6% are paid in cash. The rest from that 26%, which is it's partly foreign direct investment and an investment from conglomerate, which, if I could use a language, are non-African or non-black in terms of investors. So you have all that kind of a dynamic situation where you have to implement a radical economic transformation in favor of a particular group, with vis-a-vis balancing the equity holding of the local investors and the foreign direct investors.
Let's talk about the incoming finance minister.
Right.
Do you think that he's going to pick up from where Pravin left, or he's going to come up with a completely different agenda? Because when you listen to other commentators, they're saying that here's a challenge of consolidating Treasury and to also deal with the tension that has been there between Treasury and SARS, and also the infrastructure development programs, including the nuclear deal.
Right. Well, by virtue of policy, any minister in government must implement the policy programs of his political party. Let's be rational on that. But secondly, each and every minister will emphasize on the basis of the midterm budget policy position as pronounced. So obviously, Gordhan himself has pronounced that he will sit down with the new minister, who is not new in government, who has held two portfolios in public enterprises as well as in the Department of Home Affairs. He said, Gordhan, today that they will sit down with the deputy minister and induct the new incoming minister of finance on the programs that they were working on the complexities of the Department of Finance, the Treasury, and all the subsidiaries. Then what I see, though, every minister usually comes with specifics and certain targets and certain emphasis. So I do suspect that there may be certain emphases and certain programs that the new minister will want to
since
focus
you were
on.
talking about sentiment, I would like us to take a look at how the markets reacted and currently how are the markets performing at the moment. Let's take a look.